Here's some troubling news. This morning, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced a series of major changes for the company, including, get this, the end of its fact-checking program for Facebook and Instagram. It's going to be replaced with a system similar to the Community Notes that's found on the social media platform X.
Now, very disturbing news, very troubling news. Mark Zuckerberg is going to make some kind of an effort to defend free speech in America. And Joe Scarborough at MSDNC, Morning Joke, he's against it. He's angry about it. How dare Zuckerberg say that he will defend free speech and at least tap the brakes on their censorship regime at Instagram and Facebook, because the little fascist Joe Scarborough, he's a total fake, a fraud. He's a former Republican, member of the House of Representatives. What happened to that young lady in his office in Florida? Oh, she fell and hit her head and never got up, because that's what young women do all the time, right? Nothing to see there. So Joe Scarborough this morning with his semi-inflatable flotation device of a third wife, Mika. They sat there and, oh yeah, disturbing, bothersome news that at Facebook they might actually want to defend free speech and get rid of their fake fact checkers because they stocked the pond with a bunch of lefties, right? Lefties, and they're fact-checking, but only conservative voices. And they don't fact-check them, they just censor them. And that's what we discovered. And that's okay, because Democrats, you know how they are. They're not liberals, they're leftists. And leftists are fascists. And, you know, Hitler and his boys, they called themselves the Socialist Workers' Party of Germany, didn't they? Yes, they did. So we've got that going on. And that's kind of a big deal, I've got to say. It really is. The headline at the Fox News Channel today, Meta, that's the parent corp, the umbrella corp for Instagram and Facebook and beyond. And they have, what did the guy say today? They have 3.2 billion people on their platforms. Something like that. It's no big deal. So the little fascists like Joe Scarborough, they want to make sure that the censorship regime continues because they're not liberals. Not at all. So here's the headline. Meta ends fact-checking program as Zuckerberg vows to restore free expression on Facebook, Instagram. Meta's chief global affairs officer, Joel Kaplan, on Tuesday morning did an exclusive interview on the Fox News Channel, and I've got pieces of that for you. Meta is ending its fact-checking program and lifting restrictions on speech to restore free expression across Facebook, Instagram, and Meta's platforms, admitting its current content moderation practices have, quote, gone too far, end quote. Well, the election is over, and make no mistake, this is the Trump effect. This is about President Trump being elected and being on the precipice of taking office once again, the Oval Office, the White House, and the, you know, this is why that cartoonist at the Washington Post resigned in protest, the political cartoonist protesting because she, a Pulitzer Prize winning, now I think Kendrick Lamar won the Pulitzer Prize, and I think the Pulitzer Prize stopped being of any value when they gave it to Kendrick Lamar for being a racist and an anti-Semite and stuff, but never mind that. So the Washington Post cartoonist resigns over paper's refusal to publish cartoon critical of Jeff Bezos. Now, the cartoon was primarily critical of Donald Trump, but there was a little tiny Jeff Bezos figure in there, and he owns the Washington Post. He bought it like some people buy a pair of shoes, and you know, then he bought a museum. This is true. Jeff Bezos bought a museum in Washington, D.C., which was the Textile Museum near Connecticut Avenue, DuPont Circle, and he modified it into his own personal mansion. The museum is two estates, two mansions, big old houses built in the 1920s, joined to become the Textile Museum. Jeff Bezos bought it to make it his house in Washington when Hillary Clinton was on the precipice of winning the presidency, and then she lost the presidency. Just another little side story there. But the Washington Post cartoonist, Pulitzer Prize winner Ann Talnaas had drawn a cartoon that the papers of the paper's owner, showing the owner's Jeff Bezos kneeling before Donald Trump. But it wasn't just him. It was all these big tech leaders, billionaires, all kneeling before Donald Trump, and they had bags full of money. And she drew this cartoon, and I wasn't offended by the cartoon. There was nothing particularly wrong with it. It's an anti-Trump cartoon. That's normal for these little fascists. And then there's Jeff Bezos with a bag full of money bowing along with other guys with bags full of money. The Washington Post Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial cartoonist Ann Talnaas has resigned from her position at the newspaper after its refusal to publish a satirical cartoon depicting the outlet's owner, Jeff Bezos, along with other media and technology barons, kneeling before Donald Trump as he gears up for his second U.S. presidency. And she's very upset, very angry. And now, first of all, the paper should have published it. Let me say that I agree with her that the newspaper should have published the cartoon. It's critical of Donald Trump, and that's normal because every cartoon in that newspaper and almost all other newspapers you're going to find are critical of Donald Trump, who, by the way, is holding another press conference today, and Joe Biden will not hold a press conference before he leaves the White House. 13 days from today, Joe Biden will leave the White House. It's going to be a wonderful day. Donald Trump will move back into the White House, and the Oval Office will be his once again. But this story out of the Washington Post, the woman, the Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist, she wrote, "I've had editorial feedback and productive conversations and some differences about cartoons I have submitted for publication. But in all that time, I've never had a cartoon killed because of who or what I chose to aim my pen at." And look, I'm with her. I'll defend her right to free speech because I believe in free speech. The Washington Post does not. And Jeff Bezos should have stepped in and said, publish the cartoon. Yeah? But apparently he didn't. And so she resigned in disgust. And you know what we have here? The left in a hot tub. Circlefest. This is just the left on left stupidity, left on left violence, left on left censorship. And it is because they are authoritarian and or totalitarian in their orientation, politically, socially, psychologically. They're not freedom people. And with that, let's get to the next big story, because this is a big story. Meta ending its fact-checking program, right? This is shaking them. That's what Joe Scarborough was all rankled about this morning, had his panties in a wedge once again. Oh, he's angry. They're going to stop censorship at Instagram and Facebook and beyond at all the Zuckerberg, centibillionaire that he is, at all of their social media platforms. Remember, social media isn't. Friendly fire isn't. Common sense isn't. The Democrat Party isn't. And just amazing stuff. So let's get to the audio on this. And where does that go? I know where it is. It's right over here. So Mark Zuckerberg posted a video, and he posted it where? On Instagram and various social media platforms. He owns Facebook. He owns Instagram. And that's what makes him worth more than $100 billion. He does very, very well in life, financially at least. And here's Mark Zuckerberg in the video that he posted. And he's saying, we're going to stop the censorship boards that they stood up, right? Which they've given an Orwellian name to because, oh, yeah, they're fact checkers. No, they're left-wing political hacks who destroy freedom of speech and, by extension, Western civilization over the long haul. Mark Zuckerberg in the video that he posted, all right, and not on Fox News, as CNN is reporting, because CNN lies about everything. Here's Mark Zuckerberg in the video that he posted of himself telling us what he's going to do now.
A lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political.
You think? And the harm inflicted by online content, and that means political discussion with people that the Democrats disagree with, and that's where the harm comes in. Mark Zuckerberg.
But there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship.
Too much censorship. They're not mistakes. See, that's the misnomer there. And to moderate content, they put together these Gestapo panels to, quote, moderate content, end quote. That means trample free speech, right? Because the left is coming for your rights. He's a Harvard boy. They're all lefties. They're all un-American. I don't know what happened to Harvard, but something happened there a long time ago, and it's truly terrible. And when they say moderate content, what they mean is steamroll anyone that doesn't sing from their sheet music. And he's confessing this, essentially, and saying, we're putting an end to these content moderating censorship panels, the review boards. Remember the government was putting together, what did they call it? They called it something review board. And it was very, very Orwellian. But and the government wanted to start doing that. They're doing it. But you remember the FBI was on the horn on the lead up to the 2020 presidential election, trampling free speech rights and President Trump's rights with the people at what was then Twitter and Jack Dorsey, right? Say, oh, you can't publish these stories about Hunter Biden's laptop because it's Russian disinformation. It has all the earmarks, the CIA, John Brennan, and so on. And it's just outrageous. And then the Biden administration wanted to create a big panel to what they described as moderate content, that is trample free speech. Isn't that amazing? And look, this is the Trump effect. Make no mistake, if Kamala Harris had won the presidency, horrifying as that seems, this would not be happening. Mark Zuckerberg would not be doing this. Here's Zuckerberg.
The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Free expression, the recent election, that means Trump won, the Democrats lost. A cultural tipping point, the recent election, he said. Now, priorities back to free speech, to our roots. Isn't that amazing? Mark Zuckerberg.
Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes, similar to X, starting in the U.S. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth.
Right.
But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the U.S.
All of that is true. And this is the cultural tipping point, Trump winning. If Kamala had won, the censorship regime would have expanded. It would have continued unabated, unimpeded, and it would have expanded. And the Democrats, they would have gotten into the act as they invariably do everywhere in the world because they're the left and not liberals at all. Now, I've got much more on this coming up because free speech under assault in the United States, danger, danger, warning Will Robinson, return to the ship because if you kill free speech in the United States of America, it's dead worldwide. And the left knows that, and they've targeted us for a long time. And they got these hacks from the Silicon Valley who are smart enough to build a toy in the garage that makes them billions of dollars. But they're not really smart when it comes to common sense, which, as you already know, isn't. You know that the all-new third-generation Eden Pure Thunderstorm air purifier is finally here. And the third generation builds on the incredible success of previous generations, the models that earned thousands of five-star reviews on Al Gore's amazing internet and quickly became a bestseller. This new thunderstorm uses two technologies that studies have shown help to kill up to 99.9% of bacteria and viruses in the air while removing dust and pet stuff and smoke and a whole lot more. And, gets rid of any odor at the same time. No filters to replace with the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. Also, they're only this big. You can hold one in your hand like this. The Thunderstorm will help get rid of any stinky smell, guaranteed. I'm talking about trash cans and cigarette smoke, smelly shoes, the teenager's room, a musty basement, left-wing protesters. Nothing can match the power of the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. And right now, you can save $200 on an Eden Pure Thunderstorm 3-pack for whole home protection. You can put one in your basement, your bedroom, any place you like to breathe clean, fresh air. All you have to do is go to EdenPureDeals.com and use the discount code CHRIS3, CHRIS, and the number 3 to save $200. Make one a gift, bring one to the office. That's EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is CHRIS3. Yes, sir. Yeah, I've got more on free speech coming up. And the media, not the defenders of free speech, not by a long shot. Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at WashingtonTimes.com/Chris. All right, again, I've got more for you coming up on this Meta move by Mark Zuckerberg and the claims that Zuckerberg is making, and he sent out one of his executives to go on television and try to explain what they're doing. I got to say, the guy looked a little stressed out this morning, didn't he? He didn't look at all comfortable, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And law professor Jonathan Turley, free speech. Look, Western values are under assault. Because and it's not just here in the United States, it's in Western Europe big time, in Latin America. And that's why you see movements, not a single movement perhaps, but multiple movements in Western Europe, in Latin America, moving away from lefty leaders. And you saw Justin Trudeau announcing in Canada yesterday that he is going to be resigning as the head of the Liberal Party and therefore as prime minister. They have this silly parliamentary system. It's an inferior system, the parliamentary system. It's a ridiculous system. But this is happening not just in Canada. It's happening in Latin America. It's happening in Western Europe because people are starting to wake up to the fact that these people that call themselves liberals are actually leftists. And they're not on the side of your rights. They're not on the side of Western values. The West is the best, and we must fight to protect and save our freedoms. Yes. Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg, the guru, the czar, they like that czar and czarina thing, of Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram and more. He posted a video on various social media platforms that he owns where he says, hey, we're going to stop these fact-checker panels that we have on our social media platforms because it didn't turn out very well. And he said because of the recent election, meaning because Trump was reelected to the White House, that there is a cultural tipping point that he is witnessing. And the cultural tipping point, because the Democrats lost the recent election that he referred to, back to our roots. And he said, there have been too many mistakes with the fact checkers and all of that stuff, right? So, and he said, we're going to get rid of the fact checkers, replace them with community notes. When Trump was elected in 2016, he said the media, the left-wing media, they wrote nonstop about misinformation being a threat. And so they needed to crush what they deemed to be misinformation. And it turned out that was anything that they didn't like to have in the public square. And they had this fascist effort by Barack Obama's communist voting, literally communist voting CIA director, John Brennan, who voted for Gus Hall, the Communist Party candidate for president of the United States. And he was one of the people, along with our current Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, leading the charge, that Felonious 51 letter, right, where they said, this reporting by the New York Post about Hunter Biden's laptop, where Joe Biden's the big guy and they're taking in millions and millions of dollars, the Biden family coffers from Russia and Ukraine and China. That has all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. Now, that was disinformation, right? But the letter wasn't, by the Felonious 51, that wasn't trampled. The reporting, which was true and accurate by the New York Post, that was trampled. And the FBI got on the phone with Facebook, and the CIA was involved with this letter. The FBI is on the phone with what was then Twitter, owned by Jack Dorsey, before it was bought by Elon Musk, because Elon Musk wanted to bring back free speech. And so the war on free speech is very much alive in the United States of America, and it's being perpetrated, being fought. The enemy of free speech is the Democrat Party, and Joe Biden and that gang that he runs with, that gang of miscreants and criminals that he runs with. Now, the Meta, who's the umbrella corporation over these social media platforms of Facebook and Instagram and stuff, their chief global affairs officer, they have a chief global affairs officer. His name is Joel Kaplan. He was very uncomfortably on Fox and Friends this morning on the Fox News Channel, trying to explain what they're doing. Here is Joel Kaplan.
The rules that govern content on our platform, they've just become too restrictive over time about what people can say, including about those kind of sensitive topics that you mentioned that people want to discuss and debate: immigration, trans issues, gender. We want to make it so that, bottom line, if you can say it on TV, you can say it on the floor of Congress, you certainly ought to be able to say it on Facebook and Instagram without fear of censorship.
Without fear of censorship. If you can say it on the floor of Congress, if you can say it on TV, you should be able to say it on Instagram. That's a pretty rigorous standard there. Joel Kaplan has a lofty title.
Over the last 4 years, we saw a lot of societal and political pressure, all in the direction of more content moderation, more censorship. And we've got a real opportunity now. We've got a new administration and a new president coming in.
Trump.
Who are big defenders of free expression, and that makes a difference.
He just said that Joe Biden and the Biden Democrats are fascists who are trampling free speech rights and targeting free speech. That's what he just said. He further said, because Trump was reelected to the White House, we on these left-wing owned and operated social media platforms are going to have to start defending free expression like Donald Trump and the Republicans. And Donald Trump entered politics about 20 minutes ago in the grand scheme of things. Pretty amazing stuff. And he just said it. He damned the Biden Democrats for being anti-free speech. And he effectively, I think, perhaps accidentally, I'm sure he didn't vote for Trump. I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg didn't vote for Trump. But now they're looking at the handwriting on the wall here and saying, hey, maybe we should be on the side of free speech. Got this South African guy, the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who has that exploding car at the Trump Hotel in Vegas, all that stuff. And maybe we should be on the side of free expression and free speech. Joel Kaplan.
One of the things we've experienced is that when you have a U.S. president and administration that's pushing for censorship, it just makes it open season for other governments around the world that don't even have the protections of the First Amendment to really put pressure on U.S. companies. We're going to work with President Trump to push back on that kind of thing around the world.
We're going to work with President Trump to push back on that kind of thing around the world. This is kind of a big deal, all right? Provided they actually do something, and they can say they're canceling their whatever, their fascist boards or whatever they call them. Pretty amazing stuff. But he is damning the Biden Democrats for being detrimental to free speech and free expression around the world, not just in the United States. And he's not being wishy-washy about it either. I'll give him credit for that, Joel Kaplan.
There's no question that there's an opportunity here with a new president taking office, as I said, who really believes in free expression. And that's just going to give us the space to get back to those values that Mark has talked about for a long time. Mark gave a big speech 6 years ago at Georgetown about free expression, about these values. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of political and societal pressure here and around the world that have pushed away from those values. We've got a real opportunity to reset, get back to them. There's a real opportunity here with President Trump coming into office with his commitment to free expression for us to get back to those values and really provide space for people to have the kind of discourse and debate they want to have.
Now, let me say that, that's all good rhetoric, and I'll believe him someday, maybe when all that happens. But this also goes to the Washington Post cartoonist that resigned over the newspaper's refusal to publish a cartoon critical of Jeff Bezos. And one of the billionaire social media giants groveling before Trump was Zuckerberg, in the cartoon, in the political cartoon, and the Washington Post refused to publish the political cartoon, which is censorship by the Washington Post, and that's what the Pulitzer Prize-winning, left-wing, Trump-hating cartoonist is yelling about now. And I've got to say, she's right, and I agree with her. Now, Jonathan Turley, and they shouldn't have refused to publish the comic. They should get over themselves. And you own a newspaper. You're supposed to stand up for free speech. But Bezos is not, and the editors there are not. And they're a disgrace to Western civilization. They are filth. On the other hand, law professor extraordinaire Jonathan Turley at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., also went on the television this morning after Joel Kaplan. What does he think about it all?
Regardless of the motivation, regardless of the fact that it's belated, we need help. This is the largest anti-free speech movement in the history of our country. I talk about that in the book. It's sweeping over Europe. Free speech is collapsing in Europe. This is going to be the line of defense for free speech. We're it. We stop it here, or it doesn't get stopped.
And he's 100% right. When the United States, if capitalism collapses in the United States, then capitalism collapses worldwide. That's what the Cloward and Piven strategy is all about, that the left has been eager to implement for many, many years. If free speech collapses, dies in the United States, then free speech dies worldwide. And the left knows that. And we have a corrupt news media like the corrupt Washington Post and the corrupt Jeff Bezos. And on CNN this morning, they had a woman named Claire Duffy on the television. And they're very upset. They're angry, and they're lying about what's happening here. Claire Duffy sitting there with John Berman.
I think it's important to remember that Meta initially formed these partnerships with third-party fact-checkers in response to concerns that its platforms had been utilized by foreign actors to spread misinformation and create discord among American voters.
Russia.
Now the company says it is walking that back. It is getting rid of those third-party fact-checkers.
Russia. That was the Russian disinformation that the U.S. intelligence community spread. That was the misinformation. That was the disinformation. If the Russians are meddling, they should be slapped, they should be stopped, they should be sanctioned. But you don't crush free speech in the United States of America rather than confronting the Russians about it. Claire Duffy, not very bright, sitting there with, John Berman, who's not exactly a defender of free speech himself.
Mark Zuckerberg says this isn't a move to increase free expression, but I think it is pretty clearly also a play to appeal to some of the Republicans, including Trump himself, who have accused the company of censoring right-wing voices.
I just don't think there's any question about that right now, and I'm sure they would sort of almost admit to that at this point. They made this announcement on Fox News.
No, they didn't. No, Zuckerberg, he's lying on his first sentence. It might have been his second sentence, depending on where you put the punctuation. He actually lied. He made the announcement on... No, he didn't. He posted a video on social media. And then Fox News called the company and said, hey, can you put somebody on to talk about it? And they said, yes, we can. And they sent over a very nervous executive, Joel Kaplan, who nervously navigated his way through But he did say that the Biden administration and the Democrats are trampling free speech. They're a threat to free speech worldwide, and the Trump administration is restoring Western values. Now, with that, let's go to the telephones. And then Joe Scarborough, of course, called it troubling news that Zuckerberg and the social media platforms are looking at pushing back against censorship because CNN and MSNBC are part of the censorship regime of the left. They are not liberals. They are the left. All right, and with that, hanging in there, calling from Belize, beautiful Belize, let's go to Seton. Let's go to Seton Motley. It's Seton Motley. He's famous. Everybody knows Seton Motley. He's been on television and on the internet everywhere for many years, doing all kinds of great stuff with the Heartland Institute and also, and less government is the most important thing, lessgovernment.org. And Seton, thanks for hanging in there.
Hey, man, I just want to temper and tamp down the fervor, the pro Zuckerberg fervor here.
Uh-huh.
This is a big con. This is Elon Musk saying, "I'll get rid of the subsidies when you buy an electric car, but I won't get rid of the emissions bonuses I get, which is 43% of my profit margin." What Zuckerberg is saying here is, I'll get rid of the fact checkers and go to community notes, which is fine, but no one's discussing changing the algorithm. And the algorithm determines what you see. You can't write a community note on something if the algorithm doesn't let you see it.
Well,
so they're not changing their algorithm at all. They're not talking about changing their algorithm at all. So they're going to do what they've done to me for years, and this is partly a personal hobby horse, but it's not entirely a personal hobby horse. He's algorithmed me out of existence for years. I remember years and years ago, I tried to get not for me, but for a bunch of Tea Party groups and the late what's the guy, the black guy that ran for president, but there were a bunch of groups that spent millions of dollars on Facebook gathering likes, and literally millions of dollars that they spent gathering likes for their pages, and then Facebook changed the algorithm and they got 98% of their traffic taken away. And it's the algorithm that matters. It doesn't matter what you do on the front end. It does a little. It's better to have community comments rather than professional fact checkers. But the fact of the matter is the algorithm stays the same. And remember, this is the same Zuckerberg that spent $500,000 stealing the election from Trump 4 years ago.
$500 million, yeah. I think he spent $400 million this time around in 2024, if I remember this correctly.
And remember, this is part of the big tech con. They want massive amounts of H-1B visas to steal jobs from Americans and give them to cheaper foreigners. We've had many, many instances where Americans were fired from tech jobs and forced to train their H-1B replacements. And that's what this is about for Zuckerberg and Tim Cook at Apple and Elon Musk. They want the cheap foreign labor to keep their wages down. And we don't need the foreign labor, because if we did, the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math wages would have skyrocketed, and they flatlined for decades, which means we don't need foreign imports. We need to train the American citizens. We have 1/3 billion people. We don't need to import anybody. And this is part of the con to get the H-1B visas. And it seems to be working, because Trump's talking about lots and lots of H-1B visas.
So we can
and the censorship con is part of the bigger con.
We can put you down as skeptical when it comes to Zuckerberg's claim that they're going to suddenly they're all in favor of free speech. And look, of course they weren't, and they wouldn't have done any of this if Trump had lost the election and Kamala Harris had won the election.
Of course. I mean, they're doing this to serve their ends, to serve their purposes. And again, if the algorithm doesn't change, garbage in. If there's garbage going in, it doesn't matter what comes out.
It's great.
If the algorithm blocks speech, it doesn't matter what you can comment upon after it comes out, because all the things that matter are going to be algorithmed out of existence.
Seton Motley, lessgovernment.org, and been doing wonderful stuff for so many years. And I got to tell you, Seton, while sitting here, the great Sylvie from Waldorf of The Real Housewives, is she the Tsarina of The Real Housewives? I'm not sure. But Sylvie from Waldorf tweeted at us that about the Meta Facebook restoring free expression. It won't work unless they get rid of all the algorithms, Sylvie wrote. And so, Seaton, you've got an ally in Sylvie from Waldorf. She said, remember a few summers ago, I was banned for 3 straight days for saying that I enjoyed Chris Plant's German Joseph Goebbels accent. And I thought that it was hilarious. And she was banned from Facebook for days. She said this is the first thing that they need to get rid of, the algorithms. Seaton Motley, calling from Belize, lessgovernment.org, writer, activist, lecturer, and a great American with great American traditions and roots. Seaton Motley, thank you. Thank you for the call from Belize, beautiful Belize. On MSDNC this morning, again, Mo Yarborough was very upset. He called it troubling news. And look, Seaton Motley is right, and Sylvie in Waldorf. I don't like to use last names without prior written consent from the NFL, but Sylvie is right. She was banned for writing on Facebook that she thought my Joseph Goebbels impression was funny. And so they banned her for days because they don't like funny. And especially when it comes to the Socialist Workers' Party, of which they are the arbiters. But this morning on Morning Joke on MSDNC, they had this fake reporter. He's Associated Press, White House. And Jonathan Lemire. No sense of irony, these people. It's Trump hatred all the time.
The Meta thing, they say it's for open expression and free speech, but it is precisely in line with what Trump and his allies have been calling for a long time.
For free speech and for openness. And therefore, Jonathan Lemire of the Associated Press and of NBC News, he's against it because Trump's for it. Trump is for free speech. He's against it. The Associated Press against it. NBC News against it. MSNBC against it. Morning Joke against free speech because, hey, isn't this free speech stuff what Trump is in favor of? Well, then, honestly, it's like Groucho Marx. Whatever it is, I'm against it. No matter what it's for, who commenced it, I'm against it. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun.